Alrighty, hey guys, my name is Callie. Welcome back to our Brave Campus webinar. This week we've got Megan Rayfuse, who is actually the founder of our Partners at Shift. So we're really excited to have her on.
Thank you, Callie. Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Rayfuse. It's so great to be here to talk to you today about consent and sexual assault and prevention on campus. So, hi, everyone.
Since I am still a college student, I'm going to be here moderating the chat as always. So feel free to jump in with questions. And I think Megan and I are going to engage in a little bit of dialogue as well, just with questions that I've heard from you guys sending in, and as well as my own experiences as a college student. So without further ado, we are going to take it away.
All right, guys. So thanks again for coming. I created a slide deck so that you can really get a sense of what we're going to talk about today. If you need notes or anything, you can see it right in front of you. I know PowerPoint sometimes can be a little bit boring, as Callie so kindly explained to me. But I think often, it's nice to see it in front of you, and I wanted to give some infographics and examples because I think the numbers really speak for themselves. So thanks for coming out to Consent on Campus. And again, feel free, if you have any questions, if there's anything that you are wondering or you want answered, feel free to fill it out in the question box on your end, and we will take some time to answer those questions.
And there will be a Q&A at the end, as per usual.
Yes.
Okay.
So, so our first part is talking about statistics. So I know we have students here from both Canada and the US, so I wanted to pull in a bit of both. So we know that when it comes to sexual assault in the United States, about 1 in 6 women report experiencing an attempted or completed rape at some point in their lives. That is a huge number. We also know that about 1 in 3 women at some point in their lives will be a victim of some sort of sexual violence. So that's a lot of people. When we think about it, if we had another person sitting here with us, one of us at some point in our life would be a victim of sexual violence.
Now, when we say sexual violence, what does that encompass?
So that's a really great question. What that encompasses is any form of unwanted sexual advances. So it may mean touching, it may mean groping or grabbing, it may mean catcalling, it may mean further sexual violence like sexual assault or sexual harassment. So when we say sexual violence, what I mean is any unwanted sexual activity that has not been consented to. Yeah, and so again, we know that every 2 minutes someone is sexually assaulted, every 2.5 minutes. And 95% of sexual assaults that were reported were determined to be substantiated with sound evidence. So that is a big number there. So when it comes to Canada, there's about 460,000 sexual assaults every year. That's almost 500,000 people. That's the size of a small city like Halifax. When we frame it that way, we know that that is a really large number. So of this, about 33% are reported to the police. Oh, sorry, I got mixed up a little. Here, let me try this again. Out of every 1,000 sexual assaults, 33 are reported to the police. 29 are reported and recorded as a crime. So that means that it's criminal intent and it's been reported that way. 12 have had charges land. 6 are actually prosecuted, so taken to court. 3 lead to conviction. So 3 of those 33 reports in every 1,000 assaults lead to conviction, and 997 assailants walk free. Yeah, so these stats are really disheartening, and I think we see a result of these stats is that people don't report, because if 3 in every 1,000 are actually prosecuted, to go through that whole process and not have an outcome, when we know that most victims of sexual assault are actually assaulted, we struggle with that. So it's very difficult to report. So more statistics, college students in the US. So 1 in 4 women experience rape or attempted rape during their college career. So oftentimes for an undergrad, that means 3 or 4 year degrees. With masters, 2-year degrees. So within, say, 5 or 6 years, 1 in 4 women will be assaulted within that time period. 84% of women actually know their attacker. So that is a very high number, whether it's a boyfriend, whether it's a a best friend, whether it's someone you live in res with, whether it's someone that you know from your school club, whether it's a boss. 84% of people know their attacker. 5% are actually reported to the police, and 42% of people who are assaulted tell no one. Wow, that's a lot of people, right? And so it's important to start opening the dialogue, because if 42% of us are telling no one, why is that? Why is it that we feel like we have to carry this by ourselves and carry it alone?
I think too, like looking back at that last stat, when you see, okay, only 3% leads to conviction, it can be disheartening. But that number in part is so small because we feel so unsafe coming forward. And given the circumstances of being on a college campus when 84% will know their attacker, you have to protect yourself differently than you would if you were just walking out on the street. The culture of campuses has a huge impact on this.
Right. And I think you nailed it there, Callie, because we know that there's a lot of stigma on college campuses. We know that the media and real life stories tell us it's not often safe to disclose. If we disclose, we might be shamed. We might have people make fun of us. We might be re-victimized. We know people who are sexually assaulted are actually more likely to be sexually assaulted a second time. And so it's actually quite scary when we think about disclosing if we feel like, well, am I going to get bullied? Am I going to be shamed? Am I going to have to drop out? Will I have the support that I need? And, you know, I think we need to support victims of assault better, but knowing these stats help us to learn how we can better support them.
Absolutely.
So there is a program not on my campus. And something really important here is to say, yes, it is on your campus. So we know that sexual assault is prevalent on all campuses across US and Canada. And there was an interesting survey done in 2015 of 647 college presidents. And what they found at US colleges is about 4% of all presidents said, okay, yes, we disagree that there is sexual assault on campus at our colleges. 8% said they strongly agree, and 42% of presidents said they're neutral in whether or not sexual assault is prevalent on US college campuses in general. So they said, okay, yes, it is prevalent. Average said neutral. College campus residents are aware. The scary part, however, is that when it came to be asked if these assaults are actually happening on their campuses, only 6% of college campus presidents agreed. So that means that 44% they strongly agree that there is assault happening on their campus. When we know the stats that 1 in 3 women are likely to be experiencing some sort of sexualized violence, 1 in 4 during their college years, this stat is really scary, right? So the person at the top who's supposed to be protecting our college campuses, leading initiative, is saying, yeah, it happens, but not on my campus. Those results are quite alarming. And I think that's why it's so important to open the dialogue and have programming that supports campus students with these challenging issues.
And I think too, it's a great opportunity. I mean, unfortunately, sometimes the onus now does fall on students themselves to kind of create support systems, but it is an opportunity to create a better sense of community. And we're going to talk about it a little bit later, but how you can be a supportive peer if, you know, your faculty might not be as invested or as aware as they should be about these issues.
Right. All right, and so 4% of college sexual assault victims report the incident to police or campus security. So only 4% are reporting. And, you know, I do a talk with Disrupt called Love Honestly, and I feel very fortunate to be able to take the stage at college campuses and share my own experience of what it was like to be a victim of sexual assault on campus. And one part of that is to say, you know, I was not able to consent, and I had an instance where I was assaulted on campus, and I did not report. And so my work now is to really do some personal work, which I've done over the years, to say, why didn't I report? What was it about the situation? What was it about how I was feeling in the moment? What was it about the available supports? What was it about the stigma? What was it about the shame that led me to not report? So, you know, I was not in this 4% of students who reported. I was in the 96% of students who did not. And so some of the top reasons victims like myself say they did not report are they did not think it was serious enough to report. They thought it was unclear that a crime happened. They did not want anyone to know. There was no proof. So how would anyone believe me? There was no proof. Or they thought the police would not take it seriously. In my own instance, as a victim of assault, for me, I was a victim of being date raped through being drugged. And so, one, who would believe me? Two, it was a student athlete. That person had a lot more clout on campus than I did. Three, I did not want anyone to know. So for me, it was, I didn't want the shame. I didn't want that to be my defining story. Did it really happen? If I didn't remember, did it really happen? And so we need to challenge these because victims of assault deserve the same support as victims of other crimes that are committed that actually have a lot more outcomes that are prosecuted, that people do come forward and open up about it. And I think we need to start doing that.
And I think too, I mean, when you're thinking about coming forward, you're not just doing it for yourself. You're doing it, you're setting an example and you're making the next person feel more comfortable. Nobody really wants to be the first person to do something, but as soon as you begin to build momentum, then things can start to change. And I think we're at that precipice now. When we look back on Brock Turner, I mean, his sentence was ridiculous, but the uproar that society kind of put forth, and I mean, the internet exploded. So we are seeing a change in attitude, and it's really a great time to grab onto that and move forward with it.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point, is that when we as women and as men and, you know, anyone, any gender who is a victim of sexual assault comes forward, we open the dialogue, we support each other, we stop the stigma, and we allow others to say, what? It's not just me. Maybe I'm not at fault. Maybe I'm not the problem. We slow down the shame and we allow for better support systems to be ingrained in our campuses. So moving on to the topic of consent, we hear this topic all the time. We throw the word around. You know, I've heard the yes means yes, which is actually a really important campaign. But I think it's important to break it down even further. How do you explain consent to the people that you know? How do you respect the consent and boundaries of other people? And how do we know when someone consents or not? So basic, what is consent? Consent is an agreement between participants to engage in sexual activity. There are many ways to give consent, and some of those we discuss as we go. Consent doesn't have to be verbal, but verbally agreeing to different sexual activities can help both you and your partner respect each other's boundaries. And so we know that consent is really important. We know that it's really important to set agreed upon boundaries and to keep the conversation moving. So I made this list, and Callie actually has been very supportive in helping me go through these, and we'll give some clear examples as we go. So consent is when each person engages in sexual activity actively and affirmatively, they're agreeing to have sex. So actively means saying yes. It means checking in with your partner. It means each time you engage with taking an article of clothing off, touching each other, you're asking the person, is this okay? And affirmatively means they are agreeing with saying yes. Silence is not consent. It's communicating every step of the way. So just because somebody says yes once, it does not mean that you have consistent consent over time.
Now, can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
So I know this is a big one. I find, like, if you hooked up with someone at a party or you've hooked up in the past, and it's kind of like seems to set this precedent. What are some like key languages and like words you can use to kind of tell someone, hey, look, once it was okay, but now I'm uncomfortable?
So you do it just like that. I know we've hooked up. I know we've had sex. I know, you know, we had fun in the past, but now I'm not consenting to you touching me. This isn't okay with me right now. No, I'm not interested. So communicating is really important. And then unless that person has your consent, it is actually sexual violence if they touch you. So, you hooked up with the guy at the party, then you see him at the bar the next night, he comes over and grabs you or slaps your ass or whatever that is. That is not consent unless he asks.
Right.
Yeah. So communication every step of the way means each time you engage in physical or sexual contact with that person, you do need their express consent. Consent is when individuals are capable of making informed decisions and have clearly and freely demonstrated without being coerced that they are wanting to engage in sexual activity or sexting.
So what does that encompass?
So coercion looks like manipulation.
Okay.
It looks like, well, come on, don't you want to do it? Oh, you're such a slut. Oh, I know you've had sex with, my buddy. Why wouldn't you have sex with me? Coercion is forcing someone via manipulation or abuse or force to engage in activity that they don't feel comfortable in doing. And so if I've had sex with you 10 times, the 11th isn't necessarily guaranteed that I'm consenting. And that's what is so important to remember is consent is based on each individual activity.
Right. And I think it can be really easy to get swept up by these words when it's in like a big situation where you're really uncomfortable. You don't want to have sex, but sometimes it can be in smaller, more subtle situations where it's like a gray area where it's like, yeah, I've been seeing this guy, but you know what? I'm feeling weird tonight. I'm not into it. And he's pressuring you. Like that's still not consent. That's still not okay. And you are well within your rights to say, you know what? No, I don't know you anything. Today is just not a go for me.
Yeah, not tonight. I'm not interested. I'm tired. And, consent is not gendered. So regardless of the gender, maybe my male partner typically initiates. Maybe that night I want to initiate and he says, no, I'm tired. That tells me that he's not consenting to the activity. We need to respect people when they say no, or if they're unsure, when they're being asked to engage in sexual activity or sending photos. So respecting the no, respecting the silence, and respecting the inability to consent, which might mean you're intoxicated or on drugs, is not consent. Consent is that we consent to each individual behavior, which does not mean that we're consenting to all behavior. So it's actually making it clear about which behaviors you're consenting to and which ones you're not. Not consenting or not having consent looks like individuals who are sleeping, passed out, staggering drunk, high, drunk, but maybe they don't appear drunk. Maybe they've had a few drinks. People who are drinking, and even if they don't appear drunk, same goes for being high, are not legally capable of consenting. So that piece is really important, especially as we know when it comes to alcohol and drug use. There's a lot of instances of sexual assault and violence when those substances are being consumed. I'll talk to it a little bit later. Consent is also not when someone says, no, not tonight, stop, later, or silent, crying, or fighting back. That is not receiving someone's consent. A person who pressures someone to have sex or repeatedly asking someone to have sex until they say yes, that's not an example of consent. Pressuring and coercing someone into having sex. Come on, you'll like it. Try it. You've liked it before. That is not asking for consent. So pressure, threats, intimidation is not an example of consent. And nor is using abuse of power or authority. So, if your prof is saying, come on, I'll give you a better mark, if you're a lab tech, if you're a boss, that is not consent. So when somebody is in a position of trust, authority, or power, you actually don't have the legal ability to consent because they are in a position of power, which creates imbalance. So, speaking to alcohol and drugs, did you know that alcohol is the #1 date rape drug in Canada?
That kind of surprised me because you generally consent to drinking, but have you ever woken up the next morning and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have taken my shoes off in that McDonald's? You're not necessarily in control of your actions when you started to consume alcohol, and that does technically make it, a drug that can be used for these purposes.
And, I think you had a really good point is how many times have you had too much to drink? Have you pressured friends to drink? Come on, drink more. Just have another glass of wine. Let's do a shot. come on, you're a pussy if you don't do tequila, etc., etc. And, you know, alcohol is the #1 date rape drug. So people cannot consent, as I said, when they're under the influence of alcohol. So that leads it to be the #1 date rape drug. So what we don't do when we're under the influence of alcohol, so here's the big no when it comes to consent, is don't slap, grab, touch someone's booty or other parts without invitation. Don't send unsolicited dick pics, naked pics, other pictures of yourself or anybody else without someone's explicit consent, which means they tell you that they are okay with that. While sober. And also don't send pictures of anybody else. In general, that's always a good rule. It is not safe to do.
And then like the age of Snapchat where we can, well, now they have the infinity, but when it disappears in 10 seconds, it can seem like not a big deal. But we all know you can screenshot. We all know you can save. Like just, it's not, it's debilitating. And if someone did it to you, you wouldn't be feeling too great either.
Yeah. Don't grind on someone without asking. This one is a big one. How many people have been out at a bar, somebody comes up behind you, starts grinding on you, keeps grabbing you. I mean, I've had friends in the past that go like, they make the big X, they ask the person to leave, and you're continually being harassed. Yeah. Don't do that. That counts as sexual harassment. It's a form of sexual violence. And it's important that you do not do that because that is not consenting. And again, don't assume because someone is paying attention to you that it means they want to sleep with you. Yeah. It sounds really basic, but it actually, if you keep harassing that person, it is a form of sexual violence. So a safe idea if you are out drinking is to use a wingman, and not in the way that we typically think of wingmen who are, come on, I'll help you get laid tonight. But it is as more of a way to help you engage safely if you are hoping to meet someone and have sexual activity with them. So connect with a friend, hopefully who is not under the influence, but you want that friend to tell you, hey, is this person you're talking to drunk or intoxicated? Can I get a second opinion? Do they seem able to give consent? Do I know if they've been drinking or not? Is someone hitting on them? Does that person seem drunk? So have your friend tell you. Or do they seem like a threat? So these are safety measures you can use by pulling in the people closest to you to keep you safe and to help you make good choices when it comes to consenting.
And especially, I mean, I know, like, you know, when it's your friend's birthday and you go out and they're just looking to go absolutely crazy, like, take care of them. You need to take care of each other, right? And especially, not even if the person that they're trying to engage with is drunk, but sometimes I know people who are intoxicated are oblivious to their surroundings, and someone else could be pursuing them without their knowledge. Mm-hmm. And you need to be able to step in and be a healthy bystander, which is something we're going to kind of get into.
Yeah, and so, you know, we need to protect all those who are drunk, or on substance. And so if you feel like somebody you know is not safe, if you feel like they're making a poor decision, you know, maybe they're pursuing someone that you know is really intoxicated, it's really healthy to say, hey, is everything okay? Do you realize that this is going on? Can I check in with you? So be a good bystander. So that means stand up and don't stand by. And it's tied to the yes means yes. So what we need to say are things like, hey, Callie, it's your birthday. I know you've had a lot to drink. Are you okay? Yeah. Right? Even if you don't know the person that you're worried about. Maybe, you know, you're walking by, you see a couple arguing on the sidewalk. Maybe someone's trying to pull him or her into a cab. You know, maybe that's where you say, hey, are you okay? Can I just check in with you? Is everything okay over here? Yeah. Are you sure you want to leave with him or her? Can I walk you home? Yeah. Would you be okay with that?
And like, I know in my personal experience, sometimes even if you're approaching someone who looks, just you approaching them can kind of snap them out of it. They go, you know what? I was going to go along with this, but you sort of pointed out to me that I'm not doing great. And you know what? No, I have a very distinct memory. Actually, it was my first year of university, and I was leaving a frat party with a group of my friends. And I saw a girl, and she was kind of like stumbling, and this guy was dragging her behind, and I'd seen them around. I know they're friends, but I was kind of like, hey, like, are you okay? Like, do you want to walk with us? And she kind of stopped in her tracks and was like, you know what? Yeah, thank you. And then we took her home. And so just that, it took me, 10 seconds maybe? Yeah. And I mean, I'm not saying something would have happened to her, but you just never know. And I mean, we saw the stats earlier. It's just great to be aware and to be that person. You have nothing to lose. You have nothing to lose, and they have everything to in some circumstances.
Yeah, and you could be that person who's protecting someone from either sexually harassing or abusing somebody else, or someone who may be a victim of sexual abuse. And so, to step in and check in on that person is really, really important, especially with close friends, but more importantly with people that you do not know. Mm-hmm. A good example of a bystander effect that is a well-known story, actually happened in the 60s, is a woman named Kitty Genovese was actually attacked. So she was sexually assaulted, she was raped, and then she was murdered. And there were, I forget how, I think it was about 38.
Oh, okay. I was going to say 36.
There was there was about 38 witnesses or bystanders who heard the commotion from their apartment windows, who witnessed it, but everyone assumed that everyone else was going to help, and actually no one came to help her. And that's what we call the bystander effect, is where everyone else assumes that other people will take responsibility. And so here we go. So it's a diffusion of responsibility, which suggests that the more people that are there or present to witness an event, the less each individual feels personally responsible for doing something. So what we need to remember when it comes to consent and sexual violence is that even if there are tons of people around and you're getting that feeling in your gut, you're thinking, you know what, something is not okay right now, speak up, because you could really be helping somebody in that moment. And it may be that nobody else speaks up because they assume someone else will. So challenging the bystander effect means even if there's like 10 people in the room who could also check in with a friend who's passed out on the sofa next to somebody that seems to be groping them or touching them, take the onus, own the responsibility, because you would want somebody to do that for you. So 4 things that you can do to take a stand include distraction. Call your friend's cell phone, check in with them, check in with the person who is distracting or who is touching them or groping them. This example is quite gendered. I want you to know that sexual assault, while there are more female victims, it is not a gendered thing. So it happens to everyone. Another thing you can do is a group intervention. So have some friends go over, hey, are you doing okay? Why don't you come with us? Why don't you join our group? Let's go walk home together. Get authority, ask the bartender, bouncer, anyone else to just step in and help support your intervention, and prepare yourself. So be aware of the pressures people face to not take a stand, but what would you want someone else to do for you? So Carleton University actually has a really great program called Bringing in the Bystander, and they have such a good program in this, and they do a 90-minute training to support their students to help be a bystander, which is really great. Mm-hmm. I would love to take that training because I think it's so important. And on campus, we as students are the eyes and the ears. We're the ones who support each other. We're the ones who support the people that we care about most. And so when you are involved, challenge that fear of being part of this story, because you could actually be really saving somebody.
For sure.
So further to this, Carleton University, good job, Carleton. If there's anyone on here from Carleton, you guys are doing a great job dealing with consent and sexual health. But did you know that college athletes make up of less than 4% of the male college students, but 19% of sexual assaults are committed by college athletes? So that's a really high number. Yeah. We see that in the media a lot with Brock Turner, with other college athletes. And so we need to talk about this. We need to support our college athletes. We need to support the victims of sexual assault who are assaulted by college athletes, and we need to reach out and talk about it more. As I disclosed earlier, I was assaulted by a college athlete. I did my friends know and people in my life now know. And I've heard that that person has also assaulted other women. And, I think that's really scary because we need to talk about it when people of influence or power are taking advantage of that power. It results in people less likely to speak out. And so we need to offer supports for dealing with this because this is a really high stat.
For sure. And I think, in a lot of situations, you have to think about there's more of us than there are of them. Mm-hmm. And when I say them, I'm not trying to point blame at certain groups of people or anything like that. But it's really cool to implement peer support groups like Carleton did. Their locker room talks, which is the picture you say here, is people discussing this kind of not necessarily stigma, but this weird stat that athletes seem to have, this kind of elevated platform. And so connect with your wellness center and try and get something like this up. Start the conversation, because the more we talk about it, the more comfortable people are coming forward and just fostering this really important discussion. So include it in your orientation weeks as you plan to go in, start some type of peer support group. If you're in the States, connect with your Title IX coordinator. And if you're in Canada, go to your wellness center. If you're in the Brave Campus group, we do have Carleton students in there. Don't be afraid to ask them how they did it and ask for tips on how they built such a successful program. Because if they can do it, we all can do it. And it's such an important thing. We need to really step up.
Yeah. This is something that when I was doing my undergrad, I really wished that I had available. The ability to turn to a support group that I could go to speak up about these challenges on campus and to feel less alone. And I think that's a really important piece of campus life. I spoke at a high school in New York recently, and two of the student athletes, one of them was the captain on one of the athletic teams, the other one was on a different team. And these two men said, we actually started a group to support student athletes to talk about issues related to mental health, sexual assault, and we want to be leaders in this. We wanted to take ownership to say, what can we do to make things better for our cohort, for our class, for the people that are our friends. Because what we know is if 84% of people are assaulted or are harassed by somebody that they know, we know that these activities are taking place among our friend groups. And so to lead from the ground up and say, hey guys, let's talk about how we can engage in safer activities. How can we stop this from happening? How can we not make these poor decisions under the influence of alcohol or drugs? And how can we hold safer spaces for our campus? So these 17-year-olds were taking really strong initiative, and I think that's something that we can look to for our own campuses to say, how do I connect? Where do I find in the States the Title IX coordinator? How do we make a peer support group? What does that look like here? I know that Brave Campus and Disrupt are really involved with this. I know many campus leaders, you guys are all working on this. So I think it's a really important talking piece is let's not recreate the wheel. Let's figure out what's been working so far and bring that into our school and create a community around it from different schools. You guys have great ideas in managing this, so trust that and figure out what can you do at your school that maybe has been proven at another school, or a new idea really, really awesome to support people who are victims of assault, to support people learning about consent. It doesn't have to be boring discussions because these are the most important discussions.
Yeah, absolutely.
So here is something that I think is really important because we know the stats are really high. So 1 in 4 people will be assaulted during their time on campus. So what happens if somebody next to you, say your best friend, say somebody that you're in class with, say somebody who lives down the hall from you in res, what happens if they say, I was out partying last night and I just got home and I was assaulted? What do we do? And so I think what is most important is that we learn how to better support our victims. So here's what you do. Number 1, believe them. Believe that your friend, family member, loved one, acquaintance, a person who lives down the hall in res, believe them. Believe that they've been through this experience and tell them you believe them. Never blame them. Sexual assault is not their fault. It doesn't matter if they were drinking on drugs. It doesn't matter. Sexual assault is never the victim's fault. Help them to explore their options. So options may be reporting. Options may be going to the hospital or calling 911, depending on the severity. Options may be calling in family and friends. Option may be going to professional counseling. Help them to explore these. When people are engaged after a trauma, it's often really hard to think. We get really overwhelmed. We feel confused. It's hard to make logical thought. And so one of the best things you can do is 1, believe them, 2, don't blame, 3, help them to just walk through what their options may be. Then allow them to react, right? So after a big emotional event, what happens is we might have emotional reactions that don't really seem normal. So to you, you may find it strange that your friend might start laughing, or that your friend might not be crying, or they might not be in shock. Any kind of emotional reaction is normal after a traumatic event. So don't judge them based on their emotions, but allow them to react. Allow them to feel the emotion, because that's really normal and that's an okay state in whatever emotion they're feeling.
And it's a part of the process, and it's really important to show that support, because if you stop them in their tracks there, say, okay, why are you doing this? And maybe not have a supportive dialogue, you might be hurting their chances in that initial reaction of wanting to go forward. If you, the person they've trusted to confide in, are stopping them dead in their tracks and saying, you're responding wrong, no, why are you laughing? Let's go tell someone. Just let them have that moment, because they've just been through something, right?
Yeah, and your job is not to fix. So your job is to listen. They trust you, they came to you. So your job is to listen. Try not to respond with more violence. So what Callie was alluding to, don't say, why are you reacting this way? Why would you think that way? Just allow them to express what's going on and listen to them. Then let the survivor be in control. They get to decide ultimately what plan of action they take. So while you can encourage them to seek help, and if you are fearful that they are in medical distress or emotional distress and they need imminent help because they're at risk, call 911 or the crisis center. Otherwise, engage with them, encourage them to seek help and to get professional help. So give them some options, tell them some resources. Finally, the final step, which you should do, is get help for yourself. When someone discloses something to us, we often carry that burden, and it's helpful for us to talk about it with someone, to debrief. So get help for yourself as well.
Sure. I'm seeing some actually great comments. We're having Jonathan asks about the post-secondary athletes and the onboarding process. Megan, are you aware personally of ways to kind of implement sexual assault training, or is this something kind of new?
I think that's a really great question. I mean, it's not only athletes who are assaulting others, so I think it's really important to normalize that. And I think all of us need training in how to support the victims of assault, but also how to create healthy campuses. So I see here, Jonathan, you said, lots of post-secondary athletic department have onboarding for drug testing. And so is there a way to make sexual assault training part of this? I think that's a great idea. I think for all students coming in to Frosh Week, maybe a mandatory activity is you have to go to training on consent and creating safe campuses, because it's important for everybody to know.
Yeah, even something so simple as, I think I'm going to share this. Yeah, this is the video right here. During my orientation, they sat us all down and they played this video. It's like 2 minutes. You've probably seen it. It's like consent is like tea. And it's a great little video. But if you just put in little reminders like this throughout the year, it's fabulous. But I think, Jonathan, to your point, that's something that you guys can start. You can bring that conversation to your Title IX coordinator, as Elle suggests, and you can say, you know what, let's implement this. You don't have to wait for someone else to do it. You can be the catalyst in these moments if this type of training isn't available. And it's certainly within your school budgets. You just need to find the right person. So your Title IX coordinator, anyone in charge of wellness, the therapy centers, counseling services, they have the resources to help you make this happen, and they are there to be at your disposal. So don't be scared to contact them. The numbers are usually on your websites.
Yeah. And we have another good question or comment. So in our area, Title IX was updated with the addition of sexual assault prevention and education for schools, kindergarten through college. I suggest looking at adding this to your area's Title IX for the schools. What a great idea. Because this is not something that only starts in university. Knowing about consent, learning about sexualized violence is important to start from childhood onwards. We know that there are child victims. We know that consent ranges depending on what your age is. The capacity for giving consent differs. So I think this is a really great idea to start early and include that within the Title IX work.
And I think so often we don't realize how little things throughout our childhood kind of sort of grow to create different impressions. Like when we're really little, I remember when boys would throw things at me and people would be like, oh no, that means they like you.
Mm-hmm.
No, we need to tell those young boys, no, throwing a rock at a little girl's head doesn't signify appreciation and respect. So starting young is really important. Emily's asking us to re-explain number 5. So you want to elaborate on that?
So no more violence for victims of assault means that we do not want to shame them. We don't want to meet them with a violent reaction. We don't want to place them in a situation that leads to more violence on their behalf. I think Title IX addresses this very well in the States that says, you know, we are going to protect those victims of sexual assault or abuse from working next to their perpetrators, from, you know, having to have mediation and interact with their perpetrators. But when it comes to supporting victims, so if a friend or a family member comes to you, it's about normalizing their emotion to say it's okay to feel and not meeting them with a shame of, well, why aren't you feeling this way? Shouldn't you be feeling this way? So let's not shame them. So that's what this means by no more violence. But in the context of sexual assault and abuse, there are a lot of examples of what it could mean to have no more violence. So let's go through. So the top 3 cited reasons survivors don't report is I didn't want to report or it's not that serious. So instead of when somebody says this to you, instead of saying, yeah, I get that, why don't you say, I believe you. I believe this happened to you. Another way you can support a survivor is when they are fearful that others might think that they were at fault. You could say, it's not your fault. This was not your fault. And another example is they may have a fear of retaliation. So something that you can say that's so helpful, and this is something that really helped me, was you are not alone. This isn't your fault. You're not alone. There are people who believe you. There are people who have your back, and this, you did not ask for this. So these are all really helpful things that if somebody who is a survivor of assault comes to speak to you, you can say 3 things that are so helpful. I believe you, it's not your fault, and you're not alone. So I want to keep these up while we continue the discussions, because if you or someone you know has been assaulted, needs support, these are great support options for you. So the first one is the Rape, Abuse, and Incest National Network. The phone number is 1-800-656-HOPE, which is 4673. The next one is an American resource, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, 1-877-739-3895. And finally, a great one in Canada, US, you can use it too. It's 1-866-925-5454, and it's called Good to Talk.
For our Canadians, it's pretty much like the Kids Help Phone for college students. So it's kind of like that type of resource.
Yeah.
Terrell's got actually something awesome going on. So he says that they're building consent kits for orientation week, which in and of itself is a fantastic idea.
Yes, it's so smart.
So, okay, so you're including condoms, female condoms, hard candies, any other pro-sex but still kind of simple education tools to include. My school, when I went, we had buttons that were great and super explicit and dirty, which makes them kind of fun, but it was like my, I don't want to say it, but like, you know, like my blank, my right. So like you can still be fun. I mean, consent, like our webinar, yeah, we have slides and there's stats and it's a heavy topic, but you don't have to shove it down people's throats in such a way. You can talk about sex. I mean, sex is awesome and it's a great fun
sex
thing.
Is very important. As humans, we're wired for connection. We need sex. What we also need is consent to go with that sex.
Yeah.
So we can make it, I think this is a great idea. What Tyrell says is they have a non-heteronormative approach. So I think that's really great. Let's be inclusive. And they're including some condoms and dental dams and candy. And I think we can remain sex positive, which I think is really important because we know part of going to university often is meeting new people and wanting to engage in new experiences. And so I'm seeing some discussion here is like, buttons are awesome. They might damage the condom, so be careful how you package. Stickers. I like Jordan's idea of infographics, having little stickers or wallet cards. We all get our student ID. Maybe it's a sticker that goes on there saying, I'm a safe bystander. I support safety on my campus.
Yeah. Or like, have you ever, I know they have, like Megan mentioned, wallet cards. So just questions to ask yourself that you can keep in your wallet. I know for me on my campus, my student card, it was my key to get into my dorm, my meal swipe. So lanyards or those little plastic folders where you can put little infographics in are great, or brand them, have numbers written on them, even like on the lanyard, like 1-800, the National Sexual Violence Resource Center number, things like that. Just make it constant. The way that your school is papered in flyers for football games, this, that, and the next thing, just normalize it. Bring the conversation in any way you can.
Yes. And keep it consistent and keep the dialogue open. So we had the pleasure of speaking in San Bernardino at USC this year, and they had a Title IX office, and on the wall they had quotes, and they had a paper right on the door: what to do if you've been assaulted, how do we support safe campuses, what does Title IX mean? And so having this around your campus in your student center, holding workshops, maybe engaging your peer support center more often to talk about this, to be strong leaders on this it's a really good idea.
Yeah, for sure. And to your hard candy thing, you can get penis-shaped lollipops, which are pretty funny. I don't know if that's necessarily consent, but I would be happy if I got one of those in an orientation bag. Right. Do you guys have any questions for Megan as we get rolling about any of these things? You can send them in the comments. I know my one question would be kind of like taking it back to when it is someone what resources and what would your first move be? Say I was sexually assaulted by a really close friend, and so we all have mutual friends, and I don't want to turn to anyone I know because I'm scared it'll get out. Like, what are my options?
So I think that's a very normal response, is that fear, is what if people I know find out? But what I want you to do in that instance is think about, what do I need? How do I take care of myself? Taking care of yourself is not being selfish. And so speak to the person you trust the most. Go to your wellness or counseling center at school. Call these resources on your screen right now.
So are these not for just emergencies then?
No, they're not for emergencies. You can call these resources if you're struggling to know what to do or who to talk to. What I always say is tell someone you trust. And that person that you want to tell is up to you. It may not be your best friend. It may be someone you know from class who you really trust. It may be someone else who went through this, to reach out to them and say, how did you get through it? What did you do? And so talking about it with somebody that you trust is very important. Talking about it will stop making it your problem, and it will help make the problem a problem that will feel like it can be dealt with.
Right. And sometimes too, you might not always realize the pull you have on campus. Like we were talking about, certain people have clout. This can be in another respect too. You might be a campus leader and someone comes to you because, they see you at campus events and they know you're involved with this and they think you're trustworthy. And take that seriously and really direct them to these resources if you don't feel equipped to handle the conversation. Talk to your wellness center counselors, but make sure that you stay open to helping other people as well. That's really important.
Yeah, and you opening the dialogue and leading with a healthy dialogue encourages other people to be authentic. And so, to be honest, when I started doing work on consent, especially around college campuses, I really struggled. Am I going to share my own experience of assault with other people? This is something I haven't told my family, but it's something that I tell people who I trust and have been close to me. And so, it's also allowing yourself to work through that. But since I've been sharing, there's been people that have said, what, you've been through that, but you're a therapist. And I say, yes, it can happen to anyone, and it's not my fault and it's not your fault, but let's band together to deal with it together. So that authenticity piece is really important. Let's take off the mask and stop pretending we're okay if we're not, because connection is the biggest prevention against struggling with mental health challenges. So assault is one of those. If we can connect with other people, it makes us feel less alone and places us less at risk.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know, I mean, I put it in the Brave Campus group. It was kind of last minute. I don't know if any of you got a chance to watch The Hunting Ground, but it's a phenomenal story. And it is it's where Title IX stems from. And these two girls who decided to fight it, they came together, they were strangers. But, you know, one simple conversation brought them together, and then it started a movement. They ended up, like, not dropping out of school, but putting their degrees on hold to travel, beg, borrowing, and stealing, sleeping on couches, going around, teaching girls about, and men as well, and just students and teachers and everybody about Title IX and about your right. And it is your right, you know? So don't be afraid of any type of connection or any conversation, because that can be the start of something really great for you and your campus and your community.
Yeah, and also remember that it may be more than one conversation. I've had clients who have told me, you know what, I opened up to a partner and they shamed me, or I opened to my best friend and I felt shamed. And don't let their response stop you from getting the help you need. You know, when we're shamed, we want to retreat, but remember that that says more about them than it does than you. You had the courage to reach out. So, you know, if it doesn't go well the first time, there are other supports for you.
Yeah.
And you're not alone. So remember that, because we don't need to be re-victimized. What we need is to be supported.
And that is a lot of what that no more violence means. And that number 5 back there. It doesn't necessarily mean, okay, I told my boyfriend I was sexually assaulted at a party and he, you know, pushes me because he doesn't believe me. Like, it can be words, it can be actions, it can be people shutting you down. And there are people out there who are more than welcome to react differently and support you in the way that you need that. So yeah, if there's no more questions, do you have any parting remarks, Megan?
Again, my biggest remark is to pay attention to what your campus says. And if you're a campus leader, know that there are people on your campus every single day who are victims of assault and sexual violence, and really work hard to make a plan, because you don't know if one day that could be you. So let's try to figure out how to support each other. I don't say that to make anyone fearful. I say that because we need to support each other and having safe campuses. And so pull on each other's ideas, connect with each other through Brave Campus, figure out, you know, these great ideas. I love Tyrell's idea and exploring sexuality in a safe and fun way. And, you know, if you are struggling or if you have been a victim, seek help.
Yeah, for sure.
You know, this doesn't have to be your story. You don't have to live with this forever. There is help out there, and seek help.
Yeah. So Alex is asking, can these same steps be taken if the person that is sexually assaulted identifies as male? Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really important question. We tend to focus on the female gender just because the stats are so staggering. But in some ways, it can be even harder if you're a man or any other gender that doesn't identify as female, because you can feel, I think, shamed even in some ways. I mean, there's slut shaming for the women, but there's a lot of like demasculinization for the men, and the steps are absolutely the same. And you are just as justified in pursuing legal action, emotional
it is not your fault. And that's across any gender in any way you want to define. If you are a victim of sexual violence, it is not your fault. And the same way goes, the same steps work for whoever it is that has been assaulted.
Yeah.
So thanks for that question, Alex. I think that's good.
I think it was already said, but support looks different for everyone, and people disclose to make sure you're actively listening. Yeah, absolutely. And if you guys like, we can put that list into the Brave Campus. There should be a green button on your screen that says join our Facebook group, and that's where we're trying to foster a lot of these conversations. Megan is a part of it, so she is more than willing to respond. If an hour from now you think, oh, I wish I asked that, put it in the group. She and I are both going to be on there looking. But yeah, absolutely. And if you have more questions that you don't necessarily want to access through the chat, again, go to the Braves campus or Disrupt page and message us, and we will do what we can to help you out.
Yeah. So thank you so much for having me today, guys. I love hearing this feedback. I think you guys are leaders on your campus. You have such good ideas. And I look forward to answering any questions you might have.
For sure. Switching gears a little bit, first of all, thank you so much, Megan. We
Thanks,
love having you. Next week, we've got Chris Moran, and we're kind of switching out of the mental health for your students and focusing on mental health for you guys, the campus leaders. She's going to talk, she's a director at Campus Life at a university, and she is going to talk about how to integrate your personal life and your work life and take advantage of the benefits at each, so you're not stressing yourselves out, so that you're not becoming too integrated in your work and forgetting about your personal life. And so you can kind of learn to balance both, because it can be really hard and things can get stressful. So make sure you guys come back here for that, same time, same place next week, and join our campus group. And of course, we'll answer any questions you might have. All right? Thanks for coming, guys.
Thanks, guys. Bye.